All right. Well, if you've spent any time in racket sports in Colorado, you've heard Andy Zodin's voice. Maybe on kickserveradio.com, his show on the RSPA network with Mats Wilander and Jonny Levine. Maybe at a USTA Colorado Hall of Fame gala where he's emceed the room. But the part most people don't know is that for the last 15 years, Andy has been the director of racquet sports at Columbine Country Club. He's been a teaching pro since 1984. He's an RSPA Elite Pro, and he served 6 years as USPTA RSPA Intermountain President. He was Pro of the Year in 2015 and again in 2023. Tonight, we're not talking about pro tennis or the ATP Tour. We're talking about the business of running a racket sports program at a private club, the part that nobody puts on a podcast. I'm Evan Dechtman. This is CourtSide. Andy, welcome to the show.
Evan, you are hired. You are my agent. That is that. I appreciate the nice intro. It's great to be with you, and congrats on getting CourtSide up and running. I'm excited about what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Before we get into the business stuff, I've got to say this on the air. A lot of people may know you from Columbine, from kickserveradio.com, but I know you from Green Gables Country Club, where you taught my son Barry to play tennis years ago. So this is a little bit of a full circle moment for me, but that's actually a good place to start. You've been a teaching pro since 1984. Walk me through how you ended up as director of racquet sports at Columbine.
Well, I was very fortunate. I went to school at the University of Texas, and I walked on. Actually, my first semester, I was the manager of the team, which little would I know how important a role that would end up being as far as what my career would end up being. But I played, sporadically. It was a tough team to crack the lineup, but I was a pretty good, I was a D1 level player, but not to play in the top six at Texas. But that is where I went. But the beauty of it was, it gave me some credibility coming out of school to be, very hireable in the workforce as far as the tennis industry was concerned. And I caught on at the Lakeway World of Tennis, which at the time was one of the most renowned resorts in the country. And I worked for a gentleman by the name of Billy Freer, who, rest his soul, was one of the great and more revered pros in the United States, a South African pro, and he was absolutely amazing. And he taught me so much, and he set me on a path that was very clear that if I wanted to be like him, which I did, I was just so enamored with what I watched from him professionally. And he just, as far as tennis pros and the business were concerned, Billy was a superhero. And I wanted to emulate him in every possible way that I could. And it set me on a course where I continued to be fortunate to work for great people. And what I've come to realize is that in a sport where you're trying to be a coach, you talk about these coaches that are part of other people's coaching trees. And you look at some of the NFL coaches that spawned forth from Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick and Bill Walsh and all these other great Bills, I guess. And Billy Freer was the guy that I was part of his coaching tree. I think when you are trying to make those kinds of people proud of you, you set high standards for yourself. And so I continued to get great opportunities, which, to make a long story not so long, landed me in Colorado. I was at Colorado Athletic Club Monaco for a few years before coming over to Green Gables. And then, as we both know, Evan, Green Gables unfortunately didn't survive, as for whatever different reasons. It was a variety of different things that sort of was kind of a perfect storm. And when Green Gables went under, Columbine happened to be, I should say, I happened to be in the right place at the right time when that opportunity opened up at the end of 2010. I interviewed for it. I had a couple of good people over at the club that were advocating for me. And I knew that if I got that job, I knew it was the right fit based on everything that I had done leading up to that point. And I felt that it would be the last job that I would ever have in tennis as a director of racquet sports. And now I've been there. This is my 16th year. I'll be 65 this year. And if I can get to 70 years of age and 20 years at Columbine, then that would be, I guess, kind of a gold watch moment for me at that point in time.
I hope that gold watch is waiting for you. Holy cow. What a great story. I often think about, like, if I were to be in the shoes as a tennis pro, like, what would my Tuesday look like? So, could you describe, like, a normal Tuesday for you? Maybe hour by hour or morning, midday, evening, if you
I
can?
think anybody that tells you who's in the country club industry that there's anything normal in terms of it's the same all of the time, I haven't met that guy. I mean, there's just so many different things that are thrown at us. But I mean, obviously, in my case, you go in the morning and you sit, you check, you check the court schedule, you check your emails, you check to see how many people are mad at you over coffee, and then hopefully, once you've put out a few fires and communicated, whether it's with your team or with certain members that have reached out with questions, whatever the case may be, just call it a couple of hours of office work, and then maybe get out onto the court a little bit later that morning. Maybe there's a couple of meetings, maybe not. Maybe in the middle of my day, it frees me up to be able to, whether it's run some errands or just do some other things in the office. And then usually by the afternoon, you're back out onto the court with kids, and then you've got leagues at night. So I'm not really romanticizing a Tuesday very well. So it's not very glamorous, but that's a typical Tuesday now. This past Tuesday was, a little bit different because I'm in the midst of a hiring process and trying to hire a head pro. So that's kind of an unusual anomaly of a situation. And a couple of Tuesdays ago, there were 6 inches of snow on the ground in May. So every Tuesday this month has certainly been a little bit different.
Oh man, isn't that true? That snow kind of freaked everybody out, but of course, the next day it was gone. I'm curious, what part of the job did nobody warn you about when you took on this role? Was there one particular part that just kind of took you by surprise?
You know, when you grow up as a kind of a country club kid, you definitely have your eyes open as to what's going on now. When you're a young kid, you're a little wide eyed and you're seeing the glamorous side of being a tennis pro. Teaching pretty girls and driving a cool car and going and doing all these cool things. And the really good players that were older were the cool guys. And so to me, tennis was cool. The tennis industry was cool. And that's what drew me in. What's not cool is when you've got a corporate budget in front of you that you're not hitting your numbers on, and suddenly you've got the white hot spotlight of corporate America shining down on you when the financials have been released and yours aren't pretty. And so I think that for me, what I wasn't warned about, Evan, I really was given a lot of benefit of the doubt by the pros in Texas because they watched me grow up, and I to them was this little Andy Zodin that they watched, this cute little 11-year-old kid that was suddenly a young pro, and everybody always treated me, for the most part, like a kid that they were rooting for. I grew up in Dallas, then moved to Houston, played at UT. I had some really good Texas roots, and the thing that I was known for that my father used to get on me a little bit about was that I was way more interested in making friends than I was getting tennis matches, which at the time didn't really serve me as well as I think it ended up serving me in terms of what I do now. But then when I moved to Colorado, that's when the honeymoon was over. And nobody knew who I was or cared about who I was other than to say, you're the director, here's the budget. It was kind of like, Bill Belichick going to North Carolina or something. It was just like, we don't care what you did at New England. You're losing games and we're mad at you, you know, kind of a thing. And I took some heat about things, and I was being asked as the director at that club when I first moved to Denver to have to break the bad news to my staff about whether it was cuts in their compensation, percentages, things like that, that I did not subscribe to that philosophy that we should be doing that. So I would be told by my superiors that you need to tell your pros that this is happening. So then now they're mad at me because the program that they were making 50% of, they're now making 30% of. And if I push back to corporate, that certainly wasn't working out very well in my favor. So it was kind of like you're really, as a director at a corporate club, you really are kind of feeling the squeeze of middle management, that dilemma. And maybe if anything, that wasn't what I was warned about. That said, where I sit now at Columbine Country Club, I am so fucking, if I can say, PTSD about what happened to me in corporate America that I never miss my numbers. So in reality, it was, as I view it now, it was maybe some necessary tough love in the business world that has served me well because I go into a financial meeting with the finance committee at Columbine, and I'm ready to answer some questions and get grilled. And I'm wearing my sport coat. And I give my 5-minute update on what's going to happen this year, and they're like, "Any questions?" And the guys all go, "Nope, we're good." And I'm like, "Oh, come on, grill me a little bit." And like, "Well, you hit your numbers every year. We know what you're going to." And I'm like, "Okay, well." So
Well, so then
I wasn't warned about, but that is also what I learned a lot from.
the big question is, are you going to hit your numbers this year?
Well, I hope to. And there were some unexpected changes in staffing. That being said, there's always this magical thing that they refer to in the corporate world or in the business world, Evan, as you know as well as anybody. It's called reforecasting. So if if I have the benefit of some generosity there, and am given some grace with this new hire of a new head pro and some of the things that we've had to do to make that happen, then I should be fine at the end of the year. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Tell me, just to switch lines here, the state of the industry today. What's happening in racket sports right now from where you sit versus maybe what the headlines say? Can you give us a little
I
view?
think it's a microcosm of what's happening in our country, Evan, which is we're not sure. There's just a lot of moving parts. I think you've got a little bit of discord between the governing bodies of tennis, that those being USTA and RSPA. And I think that's to some extent at the very, very, very top of the food chain. I think there's maybe some differences of opinion there, if I may be politically correct. Here in Intermountain, we're very fortunate, and in Colorado, that all of the people with RSPA and with USTA are really, really tight. We've been known in Intermountain for having really been a model for success with regard to collaborative relationships. But at the same time, some of the other things that everybody's dealing with uncertainty revolve around AI and what kind of a monkey wrench does that throw into the job market? The certification situation is a little bit in flux, and that's part of this whole, maybe this difference of opinion between some of the governing bodies as to who should be offering certification. And then you start to bring pickleball into the mix and padel and some of the derivative sports and the integration of those sports by people that have historically, like myself, been tennis pros. Well, if your job title is Andy Zodin, Director of Tennis, you've basically outed yourself as a dinosaur, right? So if you're not a director of racket sports, you're not with the times, and you should probably have some really good, really sharp younger people working for you and working with you to help keep you current with the trends. And some of the people that I'm talking to about this head pro position might be more qualified to answer your question than I am at this point, because I'm at an age where I'm kind of going, wait, what now? What is they're saying? What they're doing? What? So there's a little bit of that. I'm trying as hard as I can to stay current, but I think that the best thing I could probably do where I am, sort of in the twilight of my career, is just be really open minded to knowing what.
I've got faith in you. Well, to talk about those, acknowledging all of the other derivatives, as you say. So pickleball at your facility, honest take, not the diplomatic one.
Can't give the honest one. No, the honest take.
I'm
The honest
teasing.
take. No, I know you are, and so am I. But no, the honest take is that it's super popular.
Exactly.
The problem at my club is that we were a little bit hasty, if I'm going to be brutally honest, about where we situated our pickleball courts, and we didn't really do enough due diligence, nor did we maybe at that point in time have enough data at our disposal to be able to maybe do enough due diligence to now realize that you don't put pickleball courts as close to homes as we did, or maybe even as close to the other tennis courts as we did, or maybe to not realize that putting two pickleball courts in at a club like Columbine Country Club, which has so many members that are so active, that's kind of like feeding some of the people in Africa, but not all. There's just such an appetite for it that by putting in two courts, you now need 10 courts or whatever. And so, trying to hit the mark with the appropriate location for courts, the appropriate amount of courts, and some of the other strategies that go with doing this thing right, because facilities have been closed down because of the noise ordinances and some of the things that are going on with it. So this is a term that I've heard in the last couple of years that I find, comes into play a lot, but basically, flying the airplane while still building. And so that's kind of where we've been with pickleball.
Love that. Taking a forward look and to kind of close out this conversation, if a new facility owner called you tomorrow and asked for one piece of advice, what would you say?
Do it. No, I'm kidding. A facility owner, right?
Well, and maybe I should rephrase, whether it's a facility owner, whether it's a person hopping into the seat of your position, a director of racket sports, what maybe is the one thing that you could impart to an upcoming director of racket sports through your years of experience?
I think it's what I would tell people you need to go into an interview with, which is find and strike the right blend and the right balance of confidence and humility. Be sure of yourself because you've prepared. Make sure that you know what you speak. Make sure that you are the most qualified person in the room if you're going to give some strong opinions, but also be humble enough and open-minded enough to hear how the people that you're obviously that you're working for, but that you're working with, and also be willing to give the young up and coming people around you an opportunity to help you grow and to help you stay current. I think that when we hired the head pro at Columbine Country Club, there is no doubt in my mind that the most qualified person on that premises to make ultimately that decision is me, without a doubt. And I say that in all deference to the general manager, who I like very much, to the president of the club, who I like and respect very much. But I think they know that too. However, to not give them the opportunity to give me some honest feedback about what they see as important to them, and then me making my decision would be short-sighted. So I think you've just got to make sure that you kind of adhere to the whole, you've got two ears and one mouth, right? And so listen more than you talk, but be sure of yourself because of your experience and because of your research, and because of the fact that you've surrounded yourself, if at all possible, by much smarter people than yourself.
Love it. Well, Andy, I want to thank you for being my inaugural guest on CourtSide here. I can see you sweating, across the screen. Tell me, Andy, who should I have on this show next, and what should I ask them?
Well, if you're talking about the tennis industry, I mean, I've got a long list. You mentioned wanting to talk to Karen Schott at the Broadmoor, who I absolutely think the world of. You know who I think would be really interesting to talk to? Obviously, you already know Jeff Solzenstein, and Solzy's great. But you know who I'd really like to hear from on your show would be David Gillette. And I'll tell you why. Damon has been a young man that I've known, and I would say, and he would agree, had an opportunity to mentor Damon a little bit. I think the world of him, but Damon's one of the few guys who went from really, really good tennis player, like tour level, like he was out there giving it a go with the real big boys, and definitely not embarrassing himself out there. Phenomenal player who then becomes a teaching pro, unbelievable people skills and great on the court and as likable as they come. Married very well when he married Christine Chang, and she has really grounded him. And then he becomes the general manager of the Denver Tennis Club. And that's just not a path. You know, I've done some things outside the box, as you say, with the podcast and some of the things that I do. But Damon also qualifies as the guy who's had a mainstream career, but maybe taken a little bit of his own path to get to where he is, to go from a kid who doesn't want to know what he wants to be when he grows up, but he hits a beautiful one-handed backhand, to being pretty competitive out there with the big boys, to becoming a really, really popular, well-liked pro who's great on social media, and now the GM of one of the most traditional story facilities in Colorado. Guy, go after Damon. And maybe I've just told you everything he would say, but I think he would.
No, I love that. I would love to. I would love to hear his story. Thanks.
Guy you should talk to, who would really be entertaining and who would love to do this, is Sam Hittman, who runs the concession and has for a long, long time now at Gates. And he's gone through all kinds of interesting, different, you know, business opportunities and owning clubs out of state and converting largely over to pickleball at Gates and the state open, and owning the state open and not owning the state open and leasing it out and all these different. Sam and Sam's a really fun guy to talk to. Start with go to David and Sam Hittman. Tell them I sent you.
I will for sure. Lastly, if people want to follow you, where can they follow you to kind of see what you're doing?
Difference would be is if they just catch kickserveradio.com, because not only do they get to catch, you know, a little of what I'm doing, but then they get the opportunity to hear from the great Mats Wilander, who was #1 in the world, 1988, won 7 majors, and you know, won 4 majors before he even turned 21 years of age, won 3 majors in 1988 alone. And also my teammate from the University of Texas, Jonny Levine, who's a really interesting guy and really one of the more respected and well-liked former ATP pros in American history, and one of the all-time greats from UT. So we've got a nice team, and Matt's has got a great Rolodex of his buddies, you know, between Edberg and Becker and all these, Lendl and all the guys that we've had on the show, by Matt's and Jonny as well. And we've had some good ones on, and it's just, I have to pinch myself sometimes to get to even have, you know, be on the same show with those guys.
I love that. Well, I'm a personal fan, so I just want to say thank you, Andy, for everything.
Thank you, Evan, and give Barry my best. I'm real proud of what he's done, and Esty, your beautiful daughter, and your great wife, Jennifer, and how accomplished she is, and all the different incredible philanthropic work that she does. Don't think I'm not paying attention. And you're just riding all their coattails as far as I'm concerned.
Indeed.
They're outstanding. So thanks, Evan.
Amazing.